When it comes to exercise and MS, how do you know when to push and when to rest? It's confusing because sometimes that little extra push that got you out the door for the walk helped you to feel so much better. But then the next day, it was too much and it took days to recover. You want to manage MS to prevent it from progressing, but when it's so unpredictable, it makes it hard to create a consistent plan. So let's talk about how to navigate around this. And my friend, if you want to be more consistent with the healthy habits that get results, download a free copy of my wellness tracker at alenebrennan.com/tracker. Now on to today's episode. There are 1 million people diagnosed with multiple sclerosis in the US. So that makes you 1 in a million. And you have a special purpose in this world that no diagnosis can take away from you. So if you are ready to reclaim your body, mind, and life from multiple sclerosis, welcome to my MS podcast. I'm your host, Alene Brennan. I have to admit, I've always enjoyed physical activity and even working out. I know it kind of sounds corny, but I do. I started gymnastics as a kid and I loved the floor routines, the uneven bars. I'll take a pass on the balance beam. That was never my thing, but the rest of it, I felt like something in me lit up when I got that feeling of moving my body and getting stronger and just challenging my body in a different way. It was fun. And I loved watching it grow stronger. Again, even as a kid. Then I cheered for 8 years. I was a catcher in softball. And in high school, I was on the track team and lacrosse team. Then Billy Blanks entered my world. OMG. I think I was the first person to sign up for his monthly subscription of those VHS videos that were sent directly to your home. I mean, was he not the original Netflix? Come on now. I loved my Billy Blanks workouts. Then when I got into my 20s, I started running 5Ks, and then I completed my first sprint triathlon in my 30s. Actually, let me correct that. My first and only sprint triathlon. I do not see another one in my future. I'm happy that I checked that box. I completed a triathlon, even though it was a mini one. I did it. And I even started learning how to box. That was fun, not from a competitive standpoint, but just learning how to train in the gym with it, learning different punches. And I just loved it. I loved challenging my body that way. And then I started taking yoga more seriously. I even became a certified personal trainer and yoga instructor. So I'm sure even as I'm saying this, I can hear myself getting excited over it. So physical activity, it's always been a part of my life. And to a certain extent, it's always kind of felt like part of my identity. So that's why when I was sitting in the doctor's office, hearing the words, "You have multiple sclerosis," one of my first thoughts that came to mind was, what's going to happen to my body? And am I still going to be able to work out? There were a lot of other things on my mind too, but that 100% crossed my mind in that appointment because that's something that brought me joy. That's something that felt like part of who I am. And I didn't want MS to take that away from me. Now, in that moment, I saw the physical mobility issues as something that would prevent me from potentially working out. I didn't have any at the time, and I still don't to this day, which I'm very grateful for. But that was always my association with MS and it interrupting my life, so to speak. I had no idea that fatigue was more common than mobility issues and could be just as limiting in your life. And it can create so much confusion and doubt when it comes to exercise and MS. It's that fatigue that is so unpredictable that can really, again, it just creates doubt and confusion as you're trying to figure out what types of exercise you should be doing, how much you should be doing, how frequently you should be doing it. Now, the old school thinking was doctors would tell their patients back in the day not to exercise because it will drain your already limited energy. They were like, listen, you already have limited energy, so don't waste it on exercise. You need to preserve that energy. So don't exercise. You don't have the stamina to be able to do that. That was the old school way of thinking. Now it's completely changed. Doctors are telling us in order to boost our energy and maintain mobility, you have to exercise. Like a complete opposite approach. And, we know so much more now about MS and about exercise and about the body's ability to create and produce energy. So we're learning from the ever evolving science and research. But I do like this approach much better because it gives me that freedom to continue a passion that I have had. But let's be honest, like that may be what the research says, but what's our body saying? Because when you're living with MS firsthand, it's not always clear-cut messages. It can be very confusing. As I said, like both theories that those doctors were saying could be true. The old school way of thinking of like, yeah, it does feel like I have limited energy. So I don't want to waste, so to speak, the little energy that I have on exercising when I have things that I need to do for my job or for my family or whatever it is. I want to preserve that energy for the important things. But then I've also experienced times where I haven't had a whole lot of energy, but I did go for that walk, a short one at that, but I did go for that walk and it helped me feel like I actually gained more energy from it. So when you have both experiences, how are you supposed to figure out which one you're dealing with on any particular day? Are you having a day where it will hold you back, or are you having a day where it will boost your energy? It makes it confusing, and that's frustrating and discouraging. The same workout on 2 different days can yield 2 completely different outcomes. Welcome to the world of unpredictability with MS, right? The topic for this episode was actually prompted from a discussion that we were having in my online course that I ran back in the fall. And we were in the lifestyle module, and it was all about sleep and stress and exercise. Like we went into all the kind of non-food aspects of creating a wellness plan. And when we were talking about exercise, several members were talking about how they struggle to know their limits. Sometimes they feel like they're not pushing themselves enough, and they start to beat themselves up because they just don't have the motivation, so to speak, to do anything. And these are the same people that are also finding that they struggle on days when they do work out to kind of have that gauge or pump the brakes so that they don't go too far and completely drain their energy for several days to come. If nothing else, I think it was really validating to get in a community like that where they were sharing their experiences, and for the first time, they were connecting with people who get it. Like that's a really hard thing to have a conversation about with somebody who doesn't have MS, because they will think that they are going through the same thing as well. They think that, oh my gosh, I was exhausted after that workout, or, oh my goodness, that one workout had me sore for days. That may be true. We're not doubting that, but that's not what we're talking about when we're talking about living with MS. It's very different. It's very different. So I could see that like sense of relief as they were all talking and finding their people finally, of people who get it and could really relate and understand to the everyday experiences that they have. And I'm going to go out on a limb here and say, if you're listening to this podcast right now, certainly if you're this far into the episode, that you can relate to this on some level as well. So I want to share with you the advice that I gave to them in hopes that it might help you as well. And as I say with all of my episodes, I share a lot of information, and it's never to suggest that it's the right or the only way. I share it in hopes that it will be some help and spark some inspiration for you. So treat it like a buffet. Take what resonates, leave what doesn't. All right, let's first start with a quick rundown on the best types of exercise for MS. The ideal exercise program when you're living with multiple sclerosis should include stretching, balance training, strength training, and aerobic or cardio exercise. Now, certainly not all at once. That's a lot. But those are the 4 areas that are really ideal to include in a well-balanced exercise program: stretching, balancing, strength training, and some type of cardio or aerobic activity. Now, I'm going to talk about the tolerance for each of them in a moment, but let's do a quick rundown on each of these types of exercises first. Stretching. Now, did you know, I learned this one statistic that I'm about to share with you when I first read Dr. Walls's book, and it's something that has stuck with me ever since. Nearly everyone with MS develops shortened muscles, especially in the calves, hamstrings, and glutes. Let me share that again. Nearly everyone with MS develops shortened muscles, especially in the calves, hamstrings, and glutes. I read that in Dr. Walls's book and almost immediately thought, well, that stinks because the back of my legs have always been tight. I was a runner, so of course my hamstrings were tight. Now MS is going to make them even shorter. That's amazing. Yoga as well? I don't know. My point here is stretching is really important because our muscles are more prone to shortening, and in doing so, it can create an imbalance in the body. Now, stretching has a lot of benefits to it that are important to know as well. I love hearing the benefits because that gives me like a little boost of inspiration and motivation. But some of the benefits for stretching include improved digestion. We might not think of that association with stretching, but it certainly can help with digestion. There are certainly a lot of good yoga poses that you can do from a stretching standpoint that can actually help to alleviate constipation. Hello, there's a nice benefit. You're getting to stretch your muscles, but you're also helping to alleviate constipation, another struggle that many of us in the MS community deal with. Stretching can also help to reduce everyday injuries. These are the things that we don't always think about as exercise, but this is something that I learned when I was in the personal training world, that the importance of functional training. So you can go to a gym and you can do bicep curls and tricep dips and all kind of the stationary movements of just holding a dumbbell and moving it back and forth. But when you start to learn more functional training and creating more balance in the body, especially with good stretching exercises, you're able to move throughout your day in a much healthier way. So you're not as likely to injure yourself when you're carrying the groceries into the house or you're carrying the laundry basket. All the functional movements throughout your day happen better and with less injury when you have stretching incorporated into your overall exercise routine. And I actually learned in a previous appointment with my neurologist, I'm always talking with her about different things. I love picking her brain because she does a lot of research. So I always love to ask some of the more practical things that really help me on a day-to-day basis. So we were talking about stretching one day, and I had asked her if there were specific stretches that were ideal for managing MS and if holding them longer or shorter made a difference. And her answer was really focused on the length of time that we hold stretches. She said that holding them for a longer period of time tends to be more effective when lengthening out muscles with somebody who has multiple sclerosis. So if you are somebody who enjoys yoga, a yin yoga class might be one that you really enjoy. That was one of the classes I loved to not only take, but I loved to teach as well. So that's one where you're holding the poses for longer periods of time. And of course, a daily practice is what is going to create lasting results. So stretching is definitely important because MS makes us more prone to shorten muscles. So finding ways to lengthen out those muscles, stretching your body on a regular basis, and holding the stretches for longer periods of time can help get you those results. Next up is balance training. Now, aging alone, I know we're talking about all the good things today. MS, aging, let's keep the fun going. So aging alone can decrease our ability to sense where we are in space. Interesting. And MS only accelerates this decline. So aging and MS work in tandem to further decrease our ability to sense where we are in space. This isn't ideal when you're talking about staying upright on your 2 feet. But one of the things that you can do to help to slow this decline is focusing on balance training. Now, if you've been in any of my live training or coaching programs before, you may have heard me guide you through a balance exercise that I previously taught a lot in my yoga classes. And my yoga classes weren't designed specifically for MS. This is one that I just found so helpful. Again, kind of talking about that like functional movement, but in this case, it was focusing on like how you stand on a day-to-day basis. Basically, you stand up. You can actually even try it right now, depending upon what you're doing as you're listening to this podcast. But if you can, stand up. And as you're standing, feel both feet underneath of you. Maybe stand up nice and tall, roll your shoulders up and back, kind of like loosen up the neck and the shoulders just because that feels comfy. So let's take a moment to do that. But then I want you to bring your attention to your feet. And I want you to intentionally shift your weight over to your right foot. So you're standing on both feet, but you're just shifting your weight over into your right foot. And then shift your weight back over into your left foot. And just do this a couple times, alternating back and forth. So you're shifting the weight to your right foot and then back to your left. Now, if you have balance issues, make sure that you're standing by something that can support you. So maybe that's leaving a hand on the wall, or you have a hand on a countertop or the back of a chair. But just do this a couple times and then find the kind of happy medium between your left foot and your right foot. What feels balanced between your left and your right? So you're putting equal amounts of pressure or weight in both of your feet. Then focus on shifting your weight. Again, keep your hand on something if you need to, from the heels of your feet to the balls of your feet. So you're kind of shifting the weight to the back of your feet on your heels, and then shifting the weight to the front of your feet, the ball of your feet. And just keep going back and forth here. Do that a couple times, and then same concept. Find the balance between the two. And ideally, as you're doing this, you're finding that balanced point, not only between your left and your right foot, but from holding your weight in the front or the back of your feet. And as you're standing here, does this feel any different than how you typically stand on a day-to-day basis? Because what I'm willing to bet, and I experienced firsthand, as I have heard from so many people who have done this practice before, they don't realize until they take this intentional practice how much they're holding their weight in one foot or another, or how much they're holding their weight in the heels of the feet versus the balls of your feet. So this exercise here can just help you to create more balance between the left and the right foot and the front and the back of your feet. And why this makes a difference is because if something ever throws you off and you need to kind of like recover from that imbalance, you want to already be standing strong. You want a stable foundation that you are standing. You don't want to be on kind of quote unquote shaky ground in the sense that all of your weight is in, say, the left foot, and then something kind of nudges you. And because your weight is already imbalanced, you're more likely to fall. This is just a super simple practice that you can do. I think that this is one that's so nice to incorporate into something that you're already doing throughout your day. Because let's be honest, this isn't the most like riveting exercise to do. You're not going to be the most motivated to do this like when you jump out of bed in the morning. But can you do this when you're standing in line at the grocery store? Put your hands on the shopping cart and just do this back and forth. It's not a big movement, so nobody even notices that you're doing it around you. You could do this when you're standing in your kitchen if you're cooking. You can do this when you're standing in your bathroom brushing your teeth. Like when we start to learn how to incorporate things like this in our day-to-day life, it becomes so much easier. And the easier things are, the more likely we are to be consistent with them. And the more consistent we can be with them, the better results we get. So this is just one example of how you can incorporate balance training into your everyday life. But again, especially from a yoga perspective, you can take this up to so many different levels. Now let's talk about strength training. Declining strength is a primary factor for falls, injuries, and loss of mobility. Falls, injuries, and loss of mobility. I don't want any of them. So strength training looks real appealing to me. And let's look at some of these benefits here. It helps to increase bone density and strength, which further helps to reduce risks of falls and fractures. It improves balance, posture, coordination. It strengthens muscles around your joints. As somebody who has had 3 surgeries on one knee, I will take all the help I can get around joints. It also can help to reduce inflammation, and strength training generates the greatest gains in nerve growth factors. Yes, please. Now, remember, from a strength training perspective, this doesn't mean you have to show up at CrossFit to get a good workout, or it doesn't mean that you even have to lift a single weight to do strength training. Body weight can be strength training. You can go up against a wall and start with wall push-ups, or you can start with doing 5 squats as you're brushing your teeth. Again, I try to incorporate some of these things into everyday life because it just makes it easier. I personally have come to love strength training. I love it because it doesn't feel like it taxes my body in the same way that like a cardio workout would, but I love feeling my muscles getting stronger. That's something that just helps me to feel better in my body. And then I feel like I'm also able just to function better on a day-to-day basis. So strength training is definitely an important factor in a well-balanced exercise program for managing MS. And then the last one here, aerobic conditioning. This is like your cardio. High-intensity interval training can be really good, but it doesn't have to be something like super taxing on you. It can be walking, hiking, swimming, biking, dancing. Like there's so many ways to just get your heart rate up a little bit. It doesn't have to be a full-on sweat. Just can you get your heart rate up a little bit more than what it is when you're sedentary? And in doing so, you can boost energy by stimulating mitochondrial growth. Those are the powerhouses of our cells. They are like the little batteries in our cells. So this is where the concept comes that you need to spend a little energy to make some energy. By doing some cardiovascular workout, you can stimulate mitochondrial growth. You can also boost mood by releasing those feel-good hormones, the serotonin and the dopamine. That's why you get that little high after a workout. So those are kind of like the ideal buckets, so to speak, from an exercise perspective for those of us living with MS. Now let's talk about discerning your tolerance with each of them. The first thing that we have to do is understand your starting point. Where are you at right now? Personally, I used to work out 5 days a week, even after my MS diagnosis, and that felt fine for me. They weren't as intense as my workouts were pre-MS, but I still had a pretty good routine going. But the reality is, this past fall, I went through a really intense season in my life, and I had to scale it back. I had to recognize that my body did not have the same tolerance for exercise and the ability to recover from exercises the same way. So I had to scale it back. And now, as I'm getting back into it, I need a more gentle ramp up. I can't go back into it trying to do the same level of activity that I was at my best point on day one. That's not setting myself up for success. I mean, when I think back to my first MS flare, this was pre-diagnosis. I had no idea that I was dealing with MS at the time, but I definitely knew something was wrong with my body because I was in my mid-30s and the only thing I could do was get out of bed and do child's pose on the floor. I'd go down for breakfast afterwards and go right back to bed. So child's pose was my exercise during that time. One child's pose, just sitting on the floor. And then, of course, I added on a few more yoga poses. And then I built myself up to go for a short walk. And then I went for a longer walk. And then it just builds from there. But it's so important to start where you are at right now. So I'll share with you now the 3 questions that I shared with my client who was struggling to understand her tolerance. She's a pretty active person. She'll go for 2.5-mile walks with her granddaughters and go for Pilates and do Zumba. Like, I consider that really active. It's a lot, but she started going through a time where she wasn't getting consistent results from them, meaning that some days she felt great, but other days she was completely drained. So I encouraged her to start creating checkpoints in her workouts. There's 3 of them. First, how do you feel during the workout? Pay attention to how you feel during your workouts. Next, how do you feel after your workout? Not just immediately after, but how do you feel later that day? Are you having a major energy crash, or do you still have energy left in the tank to do daily life for the remainder of your day? And then next, how do you feel the next day? Do you feel like you were able to recover? We need to look at this on a day-to-day check-in because there are a lot of factors that can influence your tolerance for exercise, such as sleep and food and mood and stress and weather and like all of the things. So here we may be doing a consistent workout routine, but if sleep is all out of whack and inconsistent, that's going to give us an inconsistent experience in exercise. That really doesn't have anything to do with exercise. It more has to do with your lack of sleep on one random Tuesday night. Or your food may be completely off, and that's affecting your exercise. So we need to come to each workout with a fresh set of eyes and really a fresh check-in of, okay, where is my body at today? What is my starting point today? Not where was it at yesterday, not where is it going to be tomorrow, where is it at right now? And then it's also really important to start small. You can always increase tomorrow. But for me, I find it so much more satisfying if I can do some level of exercise and still have energy for the remainder of the day and then feel good to do something again the next day. I feel so much better when I feel like I exercised and I maintain that energy and I can go back to do something again the next day versus pushing myself beyond my limit in my first workout and then burning myself out for the next week. Like, that's not a success to me. That's not a success at all. It happens. But I don't want to do it intentionally. I don't want to be the cause of pushing myself too far to create a setback. I want to go in with a more realistic approach of let's start small. Let's focus on just getting some movement here and still having some reserves in the tank for the rest of the day and then waking up and feeling good tomorrow. So that's always my main gauge. If I don't have enough energy the rest of the day, or if I don't feel rested or recovered the next day, then that means I did too much that day. And I want to take a look. Was that exercise too intense, or was it an exercise after a poor night's sleep? Like, what are all of the factors? And if I can pinpoint it to something, great. If I can't, okay, no big deal. Sometimes there's no rhyme or reason to MS, but next time I'm just going to scale it back until I can regain that trust in my body and in my body's ability to exercise. So again, I start small and I might start like 10 minutes, 2 or 3 days a week. That's it. My goal in starting back is not to immediately get back to my old routine, which I know is tempting, but it's the fastest route to a setback. It's far more satisfying getting a workout in, but I'm recovering well. And this is also important to keep in mind when you're doing physical therapy too. Many of my clients have said that a full hour of PT, it's just too much. So they get discouraged from going to the very thing that can help them because they can't do the full hour. Talk to your physical therapist. See if they can cut it down to 30-minute sessions or whatever you can do safely and still feel like you're getting some benefit from it, but you're also recovering from it well too. My main point here is exercise is important. It's not something to ignore, but we can't force it. Start slow and pay attention to the results. And as you progress, your body will be more resilient. But that happens when you work with your body and not work against it. All right, let's do a quick recap here. The best types of exercise for MS include stretching, balance training, strength training, and cardio or aerobic. And that's simply just getting your heart rate up in any way that feels good to you. And when we're starting, we want to understand, what is our starting point? What does that starting point look like for you? It's going to be different for each person, and it's even going to be different for the same person at different seasons of life and healing. So always do that daily check-in. How is your health? How is your energy? And then do those checkpoints throughout as well. How are you feeling during the workout? How are you feeling afterwards? And then how are you recovering the next day? Allow these checkpoints to be your guide and to make adjustments as you need so that you can incorporate exercise into your wellness plan and allowing it to support you in reclaiming your body, mind, and life from MS. Well, my friend, we've reached the end of this episode. Pick one lesson from today's discussion and put it into action now. It's time to reclaim your body, mind, and life from multiple sclerosis. And for more resources, events, and programs, head over to alenebrennan.com. See you on the next episode of my MS podcast.